A very good evening and welcome to KIVUMBI2022 right here on KTN News. My name is Eric Latif. With 21 days to the election, all questions are being asked to the IEBC. Are you ready? Are you prepared? Do you have all your ducks in a row? But then tonight, we want to ask, there are other players in the election. There's the judiciary, there are the security agents, there's the media, there are election observers. All of these have a role to play in the general election, in dissemination of news and information to everybody else, in looking at the credibility of the general election. So tonight we want to focus on one section of the society, and this is the election observers. I'm joined in here by Mule Musao. He is the national coordinator of the Elections Observation Group, ELOG. Mule, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mule, there are 21 days to the election. Yesterday, you released a statement as the consortium of civil society organizations and religious organizations that are monitoring the election. And you raised still some serious issues with the IEBC. Just take us through those issues first.
Well, thank you for having me once again. So yesterday, yes, under the Uchaguzi platform, which brings together a number of civil society actors who are all observers of this election, we gave out a statement knowing that there were 122 days to the elections. 4 issues stood out for us. First was we are still having concerns with election technology. You remember that IEBC did a simulation in terms of the transmission process, which never went very well. They agreed that they would do another simulation that we were waiting for last week. So far, we have not seen anything happen. Our hope is that this week, IEBC will be able to therefore conduct the simulation exercise. So, so that's the first point. The second point is that we were also looking at the questions of to do with the voter register. Since KPMG did the audit, we have not gotten the official voter register. Everybody's been asking for where this voter register is. You remember the last public position which was given by IEBC was that they were going to give the final register together with the implementation framework of what the commission had been able to do. So that has not happened. We raised the issue of electoral offenses, considering that we are in a campaign period, and a number of things keep happening all over the place. We are not seeing the level of violence that we witnessed in the 2017 campaign period, but granted, we still have enough electoral offenses which are being committed: voter bribery, violence, intimidation, hate speech, which we think needs to be actioned on. And the last point was on the question of integrity. I think our statement was coming a day or 2 days after the Supreme Court had made a ruling on the Mombasa gubernatorial aspirant Mike Sonko in terms of his impeachment. And I think we are applauding the fact that the Supreme Court has been able to champion a cause which is articulated by Article 6 of the Constitution. And we are asking, I mean, can that be a threshold upon which we can be able to be built on the questions to do with integrity, especially when it comes to public positions that we aspire for in the country?
Very many questions that you've been asking, and if you look at, you're asking these 22 days to an election, you have observed previous elections, 2017 and others. If you compare our level of preparedness or the number of questions that are being pushed to the IEBC at this stage, compare that with 2017, how do they fare?
I think if you have to put this in perspective, one, I think there's much more alertness that we have in the run-up to the 2022 elections than we had in 2017. And
by alertness, what do you mean?
Alertness, I mean by actors. So many actors are aware of issues that need to be handled. Let's talk about politicians, for instance. Everybody is been running to the courts for adjudication of one issue, arbitration of one issue or another. We have had nearly every step of the process. So whether it's voter registration, whether it's the nomination of political aspirants, whether it's the registration process, to even the issues to do with the electoral dispute resolutions by IEBC and others, people have been running to court, people have been asking questions. Media has been on point in terms of following every aspect of our election. And then we have the observers. We have other actors like the faith-based organizations, the churches. They've been, every week they've been giving out statements in terms of the state of electoral preparedness. So I think we have created some alertness with a concert of actors that has been putting IEBC and other actors who are supposed to prepare the elections to the sword. So that would be the difference, because in 2017, not very many of us were that very active. We had observers, yes. We had, in fact, one of the very interesting issues that we have not even heard so much from the international community as much as the local actors themselves have been active. But in 2017, that was nearly opposite. It was the international actors who are calling out on the preparations of the IEBC and a few local actors here and there. So I think for me, that's a major difference that we have seen. In terms of the preparations, we had late laws. If we are to compare, we had issues about late laws in 2017. We had issues about the register in 2017. We had issues to do with the electronic transmission of results or even election technology. So they have been there, but this time we just have too many eyes which are watching what is happening and therefore able to raise far too more questions.
Does ELOG bring together just the local election observers? This is local civil society and faith-based organizations, or are there some international actors within ELOG?
So ELOG is established as a domestic election platform, observation platform. It brings together citizen observation groups in the country who are based on an inclusive approach, whereby we have faith-based organizations represented. We have civil society organizations which have been working in elections for a very long time. We also have interest-based organizations such as organizations which represent women. Others, we have organizations which are representing even United Disabled Persons of Kenya, for instance. We have an organization called the Legal Resource Foundation, whose major focus is on prisoners and their rights, even in participation in elections. So basically it's an inclusive platform which tries to bring as many actors into the fore as possible. We even have an organization which focuses its work on Chama women called Badili Africa. So these are all our members of ELOG. The international angle of it is anchored on the fact that we are members of what you call the Global Network of Domestic Election Monitors, which is a global body. It brings together such other organizations in the other countries as ELOG. We commune together, we have benchmarking, we work together in terms of respective elections. For these elections, for instance, ELOG will be partnering with what is called CDD CODEO, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers of Ghana. We're sending 30 observers to Kenya. We'll also be having observers from Sierra Leone who will be coming to Kenya, working with us through the invitation of ELOG to come and participate as peers in observing our election in the country. We also have the regional, within the East African region, what we call the Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observation Network, which brings actors within 5 Eastern Africa countries, including Ethiopia, the 3 East African countries, Sudan, South Sudan even. We will also be sending observers to Kenya. So we work with partners, we work with peers, but locally we work with the citizen election platforms and civil society organizations.
You know, now we want to talk about the preparedness of the various actors. I said I would like us to focus today on the observers.
Yes.
Starting first of all with the understanding, what is it that observers do? We only hear statements from the observers, especially now you'll hear AU observers have passed that election as free, fair, democratic. There were only minor challenges which did not really affect the outcome and the will of the people. The EU observers but we never hear about like domestic observers. What do observers do? What is observing?
Observing is the systematic process that is used to be able to collect information on an election process through a purposeful mechanism, and at the end of the day analyzing the information that you've gotten from that entire process, especially in terms of an election, and drawing an opinion on it. So basically what observers do in respect to elections is that on the basis of the electoral infrastructure, which includes the laws of the country, the management of the process, the inclusion of actors to participate in the process, the rights issues of voters. So that entire framework of how a country conducts its election is observed for purposes of then giving opinions in terms of whether it is being followed, whether it's a credible process, whether it's a fair and free process, and that's the reason why you hear those words coming throughout. Was it a credible process? Was it a peaceful process? Was it free and was it fair? So that if in respect to international protocols and local protocols that we are observing, such as universal suffrage, the idea of every person of majority age in a democratic country ought to participate in an electoral process, then you gather information on how those people are enabled, the process through which they participate in this, and then you give an opinion on it. So it allows either to draw confidence in the process or bring out issues that need to be attended to, not necessarily after the election, and that was the traditional approach. The traditional approach was once an election is over, give a report, then people work on it. Now what we are doing, we are being very proactive.
So you're giving a report as the process is
going on. A good example is what ELOG is doing at the moment. We have had long-term observers since January. Actually, we had posted a team of long-term observers around the time the BBI process was being prosecuted across the country. So we wanted feedback. What are the people saying? Because a referendum is an election process. So from January, every end of the month, we've been issuing out reports. This is what you are seeing from the 290 constituencies, because we have field observers in every constituency. So we gather that information systematically through a checklist, tools, they report back, we analyze, we have a team of experts who can be able to go through each of the issues. We use a lens of around 8 thematic areas, which include the legal framework itself, voter education, voter registration, media in terms of how you're covering that election, electoral security and violence, what is happening in the field, participation of special interest group, and even the election administration itself. So what IEBC is doing, what the registrar of political parties is doing, what Parliament as an election management body, because they pass laws for the election, we keep tracking it and speaking on it.
You know, as media houses, we also prepare to cover the election.
Yes.
And the preparation doesn't just begin, a month to the election. It begins much earlier, because we all know when the election is going to take place.
Yes.
And the preparation includes, what kind of presence are we going to have across the polling stations?
Yes.
If not the polling stations, then the polling centers. If not the polling centers, then the constituencies or the counties at the national level. Or how are we going to get information coming so we can report in real time to the public?
Yes.
Now, I'd assume that the observers have the same.
Yes.
That means you have a network
of
people out in the field, and then you've got to know how you're distributing them.
Yes.
So in terms of ELOG, how are you distributing your observers? Do you have observers at every polling station in the country? That is 46,232. Or do you have observers just at the national level?
First, it's important to be able to say that, or state that observation is basically a volunteer activity. Citizens volunteer to participate in an election process such as this, and they have to leave their work to be able to observe. But for that, you also have to facilitate them to be able to do this job. And we have, if in a country where we have, like for instance, 46,000 polling stations, for ELOG to have an observer in every of those stations, that means you have to have over 46, the same number in terms, the same number of
an observer per station.
So if you are even to pay those people 1,000 shillings, you'll be looking at over 46 million shillings that you have to pay to just that observation. And that is, we have not talked about the training part, we have not talked about the preparation part, any materials that you may be giving them. So it's a very expensive affair. So what we do, and this is the practice I think across the world, is that you sample the country. You get a sample of the polling station that you have. There are some things that which have to count in that sample. For instance, if you have 1,450 wards, you want at least one, as the military say, one boot, at the very least one boot in every of the wards, depending on the resources that you've been able to accumulate. So in the current election, we are having at least 2 observers per ward, at the very least. We seek to have a total of just over 5,000 observers countrywide. We'll be distributing them to different polling stations, but very well represented in terms of geography and coverage of the country.
So at least 2 observers in every ward. That's about 2,900.
Yes.
In the wards.
Yes.
And then now you have more.
Of course, now we have more, which are further distributed on the basis of the methods that you're using, because we use different methods.
Okay.
We have what we'd call a general observation. If we were just to distribute it in terms of the numbers and what I've given you, then basically we are talking about having about 3 observers per ward. But then we go to further samples, depending on population density, depending on the rural-urban arrangements. So we have to go through a very weighted process in terms of the sample that allows us to know where are we putting more people and lower people. But the very least is what I'm saying, at the very least should be 2 observers. So there could be even more than 2 in a ward. So that's how we have sampled the country. These observers are able to give you feedback on the basis of that. The very strictly scientific sample will be distributed in such a way that they actually give us very quick information that allows us to be able to assess the quality, for instance, of the election day processes. But not only that, also give a projection of the election results. And this is what we call the parallel vote tabulation process, which the political parties are also trying to do by saying they're also going to have their own tally centers. So observers also have their own.
Thank you very much for going there, because that's what I'd like us to focus on in the second half of this conversation.
Okay.
When we have observers on the ground, everybody is talking about the IEBC. Is the IEBC ready? Do they have the ballot papers printed? Do they have the electoral officials all trained? Are they all deployed? Do they have the money? Do they know who's going to be on the ballot? Fine, it's the IEBC. But then we have other actors, like we are saying this evening. Election observers are crucial actors, because in this election, for example, they may be able to start projecting the winner, or they may start even having the parallel tallying, and they may start announcing what they are seeing on the ground. That could also be potential for very many things in the country. And that's why we want to focus on the election observers. Time for us to take a break. This is KIVUMBI2022 on KTN News. My name is Eric Latif. My guest this evening is Mule Musau, the National Coordinator of the Elections Observation Group, ELOG. We'll be back shortly.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Check it. Let's talk about banking. Or let's talk about dreams and goals. Your dreams, your goals.
If you're like Louise, you value doing biz with ease. Or maybe you're like Dan, a family man with a plan. At Diamond Trust Bank, it starts with one dream, one goal, one deposit, and one transaction. Pamoja, let's make it happen. So don't just bank with us, bank on us.
Kenyans, it doesn't matter whom you elect on the 9th of August. What matters most is how we treat one another as citizens of this nation. To the politicians, you are our brothers and sisters. Behave the same, attack issues, present your manifestos and your promises to Kenyans, but do not attack personalities and characters. Tunataka election bila noma.
East Africa's biggest beauty platform is taking over Sarit Center in the month of July. Beauty Expo is an exclusive gateway to the business of beauty for service providers, manufacturers, and customers. 6 exhibition zones for health and wellness, skincare, hair, makeup, nail care, and education. Hundreds of exhibition stalls. Thousands of industry professionals, educators, and manufacturers. Join us for the Standard Group Beauty Expo from the 29th to 31st of July at Sarit Center from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. This is your golden ticket to expand your market by meeting new buyers, launch or promote your latest products and services, and enjoy countless networking opportunities. To participate, call 0721 668 447 or email ellabonga@standardmedia.co.ke. KTN News. Get the whole story.
Welcome back. This is KIVUMBI2022 right here on KTN News. My name is Eric Latif. Tonight we're discussing election preparedness, but not of the IEBC, of the other actors. We know the security operators and agencies are involved, the judiciary is involved, the media is involved, election observers are involved. We want to focus on election observers, and the national coordinator of the Elections Observation Group, Mone Musau, is with me at the round table. We're talking about that. So we just, as we were going into the break, you talked about the way you're distributing your personnel across the country. There are those that will be able to give you information in real time.
Yes.
And those ones are critical for you.
Yes.
Because they'll be telling you this is what we are seeing by 9 a.m.
Exactly.
Which polling stations have opened, which ones have not, how many people are turning out. You'll be able to tell, to project even the voter turnout per polling station, going by the time. And then you may also start doing exit polls.
Well, we don't do exit
stations.
polls. We call them PVT, because the difference between exit poll and the PVT or parallel vote tabulation is that exit polls rely on information given by the voter coming out.
Yep.
So the voter comes out and tells you this is what
is the choice I made.
And they can also lie to you. So it's not very reliable, because looking at the color of your jacket, they may just give you the answer that you want. The PVT relies on the official results by IEBC.
So this is at the end?
At the end of the counting.
Okay.
Once they announce the information, then again those observers pick for us that information very quickly, and then it is transmitted to our observation center. Because of the sample, like I said, it's a sample, the scientific process, and we're going to have an opportunity, by the way, to invite the media and other stakeholders to do our own simulation of that process just before the elections. We're going to do that. Then it allows us to be able to make a projection. What is very interesting and what is what has been statistically true for us since 2010, when we started doing this, is that we have been spot on with the election results every time. Since 2010 referendum, spot on means that the projection,
what you projected versus what the
IEBC announces 3 days later, or whatever at the time they announce, has always been spot on. We missed the exact amount by a very small margin. But remember, because it's a scientific process, just like opinion polls, there's always a margin of error. Yeah. So that margin of error allows you to just have a range where you can be able to say, we think the results are going to be between 50 to 54%, for instance. But the point estimate is 52.5. And then you get something like 52.7. So you just go there. Yeah, that's spot on as far as we are concerned. Yeah. But I also have to say that this is just one approach. The other is that we can also have thematic-based observation, so that I don't end up speaking just for ELOG, because I know there are other observers out there who are also observing on the basis of right-based approaches. Some of them were just tracking the abuse of rights during the entire process. We have observers who target thematically just women. Let's see how women are participating in this process. Let's see how young people are participating, minorities, and other issues around the elections. So we could have groups. ELOG may be deploying 5,000 or so observers, but if you ask IEBC the list of accredited observers, local observers, it may run into over 20,000. So all those are
representing various interests.
Various interests. The church, for instance.
And all of them have uniform rights.
Of course.
You have been accredited as an ELOG observer and somebody else has been accredited as some other observer, they have the same rights. We
have the same rights.
You can access the polling station.
Yes, and we abide by the same code of conduct, because there's a code of conduct for observers, just like there's a code of conduct for media, for political actors, party agents. There are those things that we cannot be able to do. Party agents, for instance, have one over us in terms of monitoring. There are more monitors than observers. There's a difference. A monitor can interfere with the process, an observer cannot interfere. A party agent is allowed to stop the counting if they think there's something wrong.
Yeah.
An observer can only observe and maybe perhaps note it to the PO, something is happening, but if the PO doesn't want to listen to that, they can only write it down. But a party agent can, together with the rest of them, can say, no, we cannot allow this to happen. So party agents are also observers, only that they're now working for political parties. They have more powers in terms of interfering in the process. So that is, if you look at that entirety, that's a team of observers then who get themselves in the polling station with their intention of ensuring that everything works. But there's something that you also talked about earlier, which I wanted to just distinguish. We have the international observers who we say are the ones people keep seeing.
Yep.
Most of these observers come for the E-Day only. And
I think one of them only here on voting. Well,
a number of them actually send long-term observers. I think some of them are the EU already have, and even the NDI, they already have a long-term observation team. But they usually stay for maybe about a month, 2 months, 3 months at most. Domestic observers stay in the country forever. I mean, it's our country. So we are able to observe the processes from using what we call an election cycle approach. We can observe the elections from the 10th of August all the way to the 7th of August of the 5th year. Because we are in the country.
The cycle.
Yeah, throughout the entire cycle, because there are some things which are continuous, like voter registration. EMB is not, IEBC is not a semi-permanent organization. They are doing something every day. Somebody has to be watching what they are doing. So we have those kind of characteristics in terms of the observation process. And at the end, ultimately, the idea is, can you be able to inform actors, inform the citizens, because the first duty is to the citizens. Can you tell the people what is happening to the election process?
That requires a lot of resources.
Of course.
If we just talk about election day itself and deploying the 5,000 or so election observers across the various polling centers in the country,
yes,
then you also talk about the parallel vote tallying that you will be doing. That alone is a logistical issue. So how prepared are you today as we speak, Mule, as ELOG?
So as ELOG, we have fundraised, we have the required resources in terms of personnel and equipment that allows us to be able to deploy those 5,000 observers that I've talked about. So that is ready. And we are not...
By equipment, what are we talking about? So we know IEBC will be transmitting their results using the kits.
Yes.
Do you have similar kits?
Or
will you just be doing SMSs?
So this is our method, so that you can understand where there'll be those laptops on the entire system. So we have long-term observers. What we do with the long-term observers, the equipment we need for them is basically a phone. The idea is, for you to become a citizen observer, we need to enable you to make it as easy as possible to get back to us. Because remember, you're a citizen. Our observers are farmers, they are teachers, they are, people who are working in the villages. We get the observer from the closest polling station, just like IBC tries to get its personnel from the closest polling station.
Yeah.
So we don't have Nairobians who are going to Garissa to go to observe. We need the local in that township observing the closest polling station. So you may not necessarily get somebody who has a smartphone or somebody who is a graduate. You're going to mobilize them on the basis of the proximity to the polling station, so long as they can be able to do simple things. First, you can be able to read and write, and you can be able to send messages using your phone, even if it's the Kabambe phone that you have. So the system that we employ back on this other side, the back end of it, is that we develop a very, I would call it a complex system for ourselves, maybe not for IBC, but it's a complex database that we set up at the observation center that allows us to receive simple SMSs, but then we analyze all of them coming from, if there are 10,000 people or there are 5,000 observers, then we are able to quickly analyze them, project them, and be able to establish the findings from the analysis.
Mule,
yes.
So somebody somewhere in a polling station is observing, the voting has ended.
Yes.
counting begins, tallying, and then the result has been announced by the officer on the ground. This person sends you a message of the result.
Yes.
That means they type it out.
Yes.
Now there is a high likelihood of very many errors of number.
Yes. So
someone meant to write 1070, they write 1010.
Now, one of the things that we do, and that is what sets us aside from very many observation teams, is that we have a very thorough training process. The bulk of the expenditure of money that we fundraise goes to training. And remember, like I told you, we are training our country for locals.
Yep.
So we have to go through an intensive training, not to tell them a big story about elections, but just exactly on what to do, and to take them through the tools that we'll have developed on the areas that we want responded to. And we use very simple systems. We can say something like, if you see this, just send letter A, meaning that's a woman who was voted, or that's something, a particular incident which has happened. So we'll codify it, but codify it in a manner that makes it very easy for anybody to be able to send. And we'll give them manuals which allows them to go through in case, at least
violence is J.
Unlike IEBC will have a manual register or a manual that they can be able to open and be able to say, this is what I was told I need to do, in case there's a problem, or in case they have forgotten the instructions. So they'll be sending. And then we also have other processes of verifying whether the information is correct. So apart from just, even the collection of the physical results form is something that each observer must do. So that's part of the verification processes. But even within the checklist tool, we'll ensure that there are what we call verifiers, questions that we want to put out there that ensure outlier questions that allow us to know whether they're telling us this. Because they can also be telling us that this is what I've observed, but they are actually doing it from their house.
They could be, yes.
Yeah, so
they could be biased. They could be playing a political game.
Exactly. So we'll ensure that we have tried to the best of our ability to be able to ensure that we locate them at the polling stations. There are questions which allow us to know whether they're in the polling station or not, even at the time that they are transmitting this information. We give them intervals in which we can also be able to check whether, and we, by the way, they are not just working alone. We have supervisors, roving supervisors also moving around to confirm some of those attributes, even the physical locations of some of these observers. So where we don't have even satellite, just like, network, just like IEBC, we devise even satellite modems to allow them to be able to send information, transmit information from that. So I think we've tried to take care of every end to the best of our ability. But because we are not a very sophisticated unit, which has all the resources to be able to pull up a very complex system, then there could be gaps here and there. But I think so far our experience has been that, especially when it comes to the things like the PVT, we have nearly registered a response rate of over 99% in terms of getting feedback and getting information.
Working,
yes,
and people working and people knowing what they need to do.
Exactly.
Who checks the observer? Everybody is checking the IEBC to make sure the IEBC is doing the right thing. Who checks you?
Well, the concept of actors. Number one, remember, observers are accredited by the commission. So that's the first checker, because the commission accredits you so they can be able to report to it and to give it information regarding that electoral process. So that's the first person. The first buck stops with the commission, the accrediting authority. It has monitors who walk around. They will quickly call me and tell me we have an observer who is misbehaving. We made you sign a code of conduct, and we can see this particular observer is not following that. So they may even demand that person to be disqualified. So the commission is doing that. We also have even the other observers. Observers observe themselves. One of the things I'm supposed to go and do in a polling station is to find out whether there are any other observers and whether they are using any tool, for instance. What tools are they using? Not to compare with mine, but just to understand the level that they are prepared, they are observing the process. Have they been there the entire time? Or they are roving? They
so
can also be roving.
Observers as well.
So we also observe ourselves. We also have the public. Why do we have citizen observers? Because they are coming from that village. And because everybody in that village is not looking at them. So Latif is our observer in a certain center. Everybody knows Latif. They'll be looking at you in terms of what you are doing. They'll be the first ones to also tell us, no, but Latif is Azimio, or Latif is Kenya Kwanza, you know. So there's a lot of information which comes through. And then remember, like I told you, for ELOG, I don't know about the others, but for ELOG, the fact that we allow organizations which are already organized, churches, the Catholic Church is a member of ELOG. When they send me an observer, I expect them to know that observer.
They've already done the background check.
The due diligence. And that they continue doing the due diligence, because they also don't want the observer to be the one who lets down the entire observation mission. So even our members and organizations that support ELOG, the international observers who also come and see what we are doing. So there's an entire system, not exactly positioned to be able to do this in a very organized way, but it does it nevertheless. But the IEBC and any accrediting authority have the power of
the overall
oversight, yes,
of what you're doing.
Yes.
Final question, Mule. 21 days to go. Are you prepared?
Well, like I said, we are prepared, and I'll give you a quick analysis of my preparation. I have from last Friday, we have been started the training of observers. We have more than 200 trainings because the numbers also determine the number of trainings that you have. You don't want to put very many observers in one room. So in groups of 30 or 40, and then regionally. So we'll be having over 200 trainings between now and I think August the 6th, when we'll be now deploying them. And we have prepared the materials which they need to have. We have an observation center at Lenana Road, which we are setting up. We are finalizing the setting up. It will be a data center. We'll invite the media to come and see how we are going about the business, and even test some of the systems that we are talking about in terms of a data center. So we are prepared for the elections, and we are good to go. And we've been prepared. Our observers have been reporting since January, so we've been on the scene.
You've been there, you've been ready.
We've been ready.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And of course, we'll be observing and checking whether the observers are doing
I forgot to mention the media is also part of the observers, people who observe the observers.
That's true.
Yeah. That's the team. That's our organization.
Mule, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Kivumbi 2022. The conversation continues. This is not the end of Kivumbi. There'll be more Kivumbi after the news with Ken Mijungu, who will be having a number of guests in the studio. Lawyer Willis Otieno, political analyst Herman Manyora, Joshua Kipto, who's an advocate. He'll also be having Gloria Oroba, who's a political commentator, and former ACK Commissioner Jack Tumwa. All of them will be with Ken Mijungu at 10 o'clock. But shortly, it's Ken Mijungu with the news. My name is Eric Latif. Do have a good evening.